I stood there in our bedroom, the pale light of dawn sneaking through the curtains, holding Isabel's silk scarf in my hands. It was soft, delicate, the kind of thing she'd wear to some expensive hospital dinner or a night out with her doctor, buddies. But that morning it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. The smell hit me immediately. A pungent, musky cologne that wasn't mine, clinging to the fabric like an unwanted guest. I shook it off at first, convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe she hugged some guy at work, a co-worker with lousy taste in aftershave. But then I saw it. The lipstick stain, brilliant scarlet, spread on the edge, a color she never wore. My stomach fell. I just stood there staring at it, my head racing, but my body frozen. 13 years of marriage. And this was how everything started to unravel. Not with some great struggle, but with a quiet, sickening moment I couldn't unsee. I'd been ignoring the warnings for months. Isabel's late nights at the hospital had become regular. Her justifications? Busy shift. Papers piled up. I didn't push her on it. I trusted her. She was a pediatrician, for God's sake. Helping babies was her life. And me? I was busy too. Crunching numbers as a financial consultant, keeping our life in Ridgewood Heights alive. We had a good setup. A big house with a wraparound porch. Cole and Ava running around the backyard. A marriage that looked solid to anyone watching. But that scarf. It changed everything. I dropped it on the dresser. And that's when I noticed something else. My shirt, the one she'd worn last night after spilling wine on her dress. It was hanging over the chair. I picked it up. And there it was. Another lipstick stain. Same red. My chest clenched. This wasn't a mistake. She wasn't just cheating. She was leaving clues, like she wanted me to catch her. I don't know how long I stood there, cloth in my hands, my mind whirling. The kids were still asleep down the hall. Cole, 11, probably dreaming about baseball. Ava, 8, cuddled up with that stuffed bunny she never let go of. The house was peaceful. But in my thoughts, it was mayhem. How long had this been going on? Who? Was he some doctor she worked with? A patient's dad? I kept picturing her, smiling with someone else, her hand on his arm, while I sat at home fixing dinner for the kids. My throat burned. I wanted to shout, to shake her awake and demand answers. But I didn't. I just put the shirt back, smoothed it out like nothing was wrong, and walked downstairs to make coffee. And that's when it hit me. Isabel didn't just breach my trust. She broke us, and worse, she was tempting me to do something about it. The rest of the morning was a blur. Isabel came downstairs, all smiles. Her hair still damp from the shower. "Morning, Adam," she said, grasping her cup like it was any other day. I nodded, mumbled something back, but my eyes kept straying to her neck, wondering if that cologne was still on her skin. She didn't notice, or didn't care. She kissed the kids goodbye, packed her luggage, and left for work. I stood at the kitchen window, watching her car disappear down the driveway. My hands gripped the sink. 13 years. 2 kids. A life I thought was ours. And now, this. I didn't know what to do next. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let her play me for a fool. Not anymore. That scarf, that lipstick. They weren't just proof. They were the start of something I couldn't ignore, something that would change everything I thought I knew about my wife, my family, and myself. Internal jokes. He'd lose it if he knew, and then the worst. He still believes we're simply having troubles. Sad guy, Marcus replied. At least he makes an excellent babysitter while you're with me. I felt terrible, like the air had been sucked out of the room. I sat staring at the screen, my heart racing so hard I could hear it in my ears. Every word was a knife slicing through 13 years of trust. Isabel wasn't just cheating, she was laughing about it. Insulting me with this guy. Poor guy. That's what she called me. The man who had stayed up with her through med school finals. who held her hand during labor with Cole and Ava, who had constructed this entire existence with her. She had converted me into a joke. My hands tightened on the phone, and for a second, I wanted to smash it against the wall, let it shatter like everything else. But I didn't. I heard the shower stop, the creak of the floorboards as she moved upstairs. I laid the phone back on the counter exactly where it had been and turned to the coffee maker. My hands were stable now, but inwardly, I was a wreck. She came down a few minutes later, wrapped in her robe, hair falling onto her shoulders. "Morning," she said, grabbing her mug like it was any other day. I nodded. "Morning," and I handed her the coffee. She smiled. A little fast. The kind of grin you give a stranger. And I watched her, scanning her face for something. Anything. Guilt? Shame? Nothing. She seemed normal. Calm. Like she hadn't spent months lying to me. I wanted to shout. "Who's Marcus? What the hell have you been doing?" But I didn't. I simply stood there, sipping my coffee, letting the silence stretch between us. She kissed me goodbye, light, barely there, and stepped out the door. I waited until her car was gone, then walked into the restroom, shut the door, and hit the mirror. The glass smashed. My knuckles bled. But I didn't feel it. All I felt was wrath. The rest of the day was a blur. I dropped the kids at school, went to my office, looked at my computer screen without seeing it. Figures swam in front of me. Client investments, profit, margins. But none of it mattered. All I could see were the texts. "When are you telling him?" She was planning to leave me, and Marcus was in on it. I replayed every moment I had seen him. At hospital events, shaking my hand, smiling like we were mates. Had he been laughing at me then, too? And Isabel? How long had she been sneaking off to him? The Lakehurst mansion. She told me it was a work retreat last month. I had watched Cole and Ava that weekend. Took them to the park while she was with him. My chest ached. A mix of wrath and shame. I had been blind, trusting, while they transformed me into a fool. By the time I arrived home, the kids were finishing their homework. I cooked dinner on autopilot. Chicken and rice. Their favorite, Isabel texted. "Late again, hospital stuff." I didn't react. Once the kids were in bed, I sat on the couch. The house. Dark around me, and I let it sink in. She wasn't just cheating, she was done. With me. With us. And she had been stringing me along until she was ready to pull the plug. The texts showed it. Months of lies. Sliding away while I held everything together. I thought about the scarf, the lipstick, the cologne. They weren't mishaps. She had left them for me to find, testing me, maybe even wanting me to blow up so she could walk away clean. But I wasn't going to give her that. Not yet. I would play along. Keep quiet. Figure out my next move. Because if Isabel believed she could shatter me and walk away smiling, she was dead wrong.